الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala in fiqh with the subject of the salah that we started last time, and we mentioned many masail, and the last thing that we had talked about is wajibat as-salah. So we talked about the 14 pillars of the salah and then the 8 wajibat of the salah, and the difference or some of the differences between the rukn and the wajib, the pillar versus the obligations. And a rukn does not get void in any condition. It has to be done. There's no case where a person doesn't have to make a rukn or a pillar of the salah. It has to be done. Whether a person forgets it or intentionally, of course, this breaks the salah. But if he forgets it, if he doesn't know the ruling of it, that it's a pillar of the salah, it doesn't matter. Once he gets to know, once he remembers, he has to make that rukn. And we'll talk about sujood al-sahwi later, inshallah. What happens if someone missed the rukn, one of the 14 pillars of the salah? Person forgets it, or doesn't know the ruling that it's a pillar, for example. Someone that for salatul fard, he's able to stand for salatul fard. But he thought since he's going to sit on a chair, because he's not able to make sujood, so he sat in the salah from the very beginning, not knowing that standing in the salah is a pillar, and he's able to stand. It's not difficult for him or anything. He's just not able to make sujood. That person's salah is not valid. If he is not knowing the ruling, sinful or sins is something else. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. A person didn't know, so there's no sin upon him. But he has to repeat that salah, even if it's after 10 years. Once he got to know, he has to repeat the salah. The salah is not valid because this is a pillar of the salah. Or if someone corrected him after the salah, for example, if he missed one pillar in one rak'ah, if it's within the same rak'ah, then he can go and do it right in the same rak'ah. If the rak'ah passed, then this whole rak'ah is void, is not valid. He has to make it up at the end. But if you have any questions in this, inshallah, this will be talked about in sujood al-sahw. But now, after the wajibat as-salah, which is if someone intentionally leaves it, the salah is not valid. And if someone forgets it, or not knowing the ruling of it, the salah is valid. And what's sufficient for it is just sujood al-sahw at the end without having to make this wajibat of the salah. These are the 8 wajibat of the salah. So without repeating them, we can go straight to the shurut as-salah. Shurut as-salah. So the conditions, this is where we stopped. Shurut as-salah. Shurut, and we need to start to remember the terminologies, inshallah, so that we don't always have to translate them. Shurut is the plural of shart. And shart is the condition. But linguistically, it means al-alama, the sign of something. So, but shart here, this is what it linguistically means. But religiously, there's a definition for it, like everything else. What is the definition of a shart as it's mentioned in the book? One of these definitions is ما لا يوجد المشروط مع عدمه ولا يلزم أن يوجد عند وجوده. Meaning, you have shart, you have a condition, and you have mashrut, meaning a condition for something. So the thing that is conditioned for, or it's the condition is for. So for example, shurutu salah. So there's conditions to be fulfilled for the salah to be prayed or for the salah to be valid, right? So the meaning of the definition is that as-salah, which is the subject of what we're talking about, the condition for, if the shart is not there, if the condition is not there, that mashrut, or in this case the salah, is not there. Right? Very easy. Because it's a condition for it. Wudu is a condition for the salah. If there's no wudu, there's no salah. Meaning there's no salah valid. Because a person doesn't have wudu. And wudu is a condition for the salah. Right? And other conditions is going to be mentioned as we get to know them, and repeated also from the other ones, wudu and tayammum and so on. But we're talking about the definition. So the first part of the definition, if the mashrut, which is, I'm not sure what's the one word in English that you would call the mashrut, what's the condition is for, right? If the condition is not there, then what the condition is for is not there. And then the second part of the definition, وَلَا يَلْزَمُ أَنْ يُوجَدَ عِنْدَ وُجُودِهِ, which means if you fulfill the condition of the salah, do you have to make salah? No, you don't have to. So it is not by necessity, if the condition is done, that you have to do what that condition is for, right? So if a person made wudu, just like that now, for example, does he have to make salah? He already prayed Maghrib, alhamdulillah, prayed Sunnah prayer, everything. And he just wanted to make wudu. Just to do the condition of the salah, it does not mean that you have to make the salah. Right? So it's clear. So this is the definition of the shart. Remember these 2 points, where what's the condition is for, it's not valid unless the condition is done. It's a condition. So the condition has to be there for the ibadah to be valid. But if you do the condition, then you don't have to make the ibadah. Can someone read to us what the translation of that in the English version? Or do you have the English? You have it? Just read it out loud.
Shurut, prerequisites, conditions, practically means a sign. Technically, it refers to something, say X, that Y cannot exist without. However, the mere existence of X does not necessarily mean that Y will occur.
So they just made it with X and Y, right? But in Arabic, shart al-mashrut, right? The same word is used. Al-shart is the condition, al-mashrut is from the same word. It's so easy to remember because it's what the condition is for, right? So both should be there, inshallah ta'ala, in understanding of the definition. And we can apply that in the shurut. Now, what are the shurut of the salah? An-niyyah. The niyyah, and the niyyah here from the fiqh perspective is not the niyyah seeking rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Because this is a must, of course. The salah is not valid unless a person seeks rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. If it's riya, showing off, the salah is not accepted. But the niyyah in the fiqh perspective is the niyyah of that specific salah is for what? So the niyyah that this is salatul isha, that this is sunnah salah, that this is dhuhr, things like this. So this is the niyyah. And the niyyah is in the heart. You don't say anything, you don't have to stop and think. It's just something that is already present in the heart, and this is the intention for the action. Some of the ulama, they put it in the condition section, and some put it in the pillar section. So why? Because of the differences in definitions. So one of the things of the shart, that it's not part of the act itself. So the niyyah is one thing, the salah is another thing. But anyway, so here it's mentioned as one of the conditions. Some they would say that it's a pillar because it's part of the salah. So niyyah here, and we'll take this inshallah, many of them, they would mention the niyyah as a condition. And when it comes to the hukm or to the ruling, it doesn't make a difference. It's just putting it in two different categories. The outcome is the same. Whether it's a pillar of the salah or a condition of the salah, salah is not valid unless you have a valid intentions or a niyyah for it. And each one, of course, we have, there's so many details that can be mentioned. And that's why the niyyah is in the heart. There's no hadith, there's no evidence whatsoever that the niyyah is in one's speech. That's why to say nawaitu an usalli has no meaning to it. Meaning, it does not have any significance to it in your salah. Plus, it's not from the sunnah. Many ulama, they said it's bid'ah, or it's weak opinion if it's mentioned in the books of fiqh and so on. So, but how it's not significant whatsoever is if you come, for example, someone comes for Salatul Asr. And I don't want to give so much details because we need to be brief, inshallah. But someone coming for Salatul Asr, he's busy-minded, thinking of all kinds of things, and he's coming for Salatul Asr. But then he stood up in the line, he says, Nawaitu, those who say Nawaitu, right? Nawaitu an usalli dhuhr. And he says, Allahu Akbar. Is he praying Asr or Dhuhr? It's time for Asr, and he's coming for Salatul Asr. But he made a mistake, right? Because he's busy, his heart is busy. He says, Nawaitu an usalli dhuhr. Which one is he doing now? Asr. But then it's a confusion to this person. Now he's confused. Am I praying dhuhr or asr? So he's going to say it again, or he's going to come out of the salah or something like this. That's why an-niyyah mahilluha al-qalb. An-niyyah is in the heart. The speech has nothing to do with the intentions. And that's why There's no such a thing as nawaitu and usalli kada wa kada, because this is an act that is done by the heart. And you don't have to focus because you already know. Nobody put the plate of food in front of him and says, nawaitu an akula, I have the intention to eat rice and chicken. You know what you're doing. So this is the intention in the heart. But anyway, so this is a condition. النية والإسلام. Al-Islam is a condition. So a person has to be a Muslim to be, for his salah to be valid. But if he become a Muslim now, does he have to make salah immediately? Of course, yes, but it's not a must with the condition. Wal-aql, as it's always mentioned as a condition for all of the ibadat, that a person is sane. He's not insane. Someone that is sane. At-tamyiz is to be able to differentiate between things, which is the age of 7 and above for the most part. So this is shart wujub or shart sihha. There's two types of shurut, but we mentioned them briefly, but you don't have to know them now. But when you say a tamiz, for the 7 years old or 10 years old, a child 10 years old, this is a condition for the salah to be valid or a condition for the salah to be an obligation? It's a condition for the salah to be valid. Because salah for someone that is 7 years old and above, the salah is valid. He gets reward for it. His parents get reward for it, those who help him and so on. But is it obligatory upon him? No. So this is not a condition of obligation. This is a condition of validity of the salah. وَدُخُولُ الْوَقْتِ, the beginning of the time. This is a condition for the salah. Salatul Asr, a condition for Salatul Asr is that the time of the Salatul Asr starts. And of course, there's difference between the musafir versus the non-musafir. But again, the time for the salah has to enter, which is dukhulul waqt, as a condition for the salah. Wat-tahara, purification. Wudu, ghusl if it's needed. So, tahara is a condition for the salah. Wastiqbalul qibla, and to face the qibla, this is a condition for the salah. And one of the things for the conditions also that it has to be present and established from the beginning of the salah to the end. You cannot interrupt the condition. If you break your wudu, the salah is not valid. So the same thing with facing the qibla. Facing the qibla before you say takbiratul ihram, you have to face the qibla to the best of your ability, of course. And if in any time in the salah that you face other than the qibla, you turn away from the qibla, the salah is not valid. This is different than looking. A person is stealing a look here or there, it takes away from the rewards of the salah. But if a person turns like this, or like that, or looking like that, the salah is not valid. He's not facing the qibla anymore. And some people, they do something without knowing. Sometimes a person would bend over while standing to pick up something. I've seen that more than one time. Someone, his glasses on the floor, and child is running around and he's standing on the side, so he's worried that the glasses will get broken, so he would bend over while standing. He's not facing the qibla like this. So anyway, istiqbal al-qibla from the beginning to the end. Satrul awra, to cover the awra. And the awra for the salah, this is also something that for the men, it's from the navel to the knees, with the condition that also the shoulders are covered, that something is on the shoulder. And for women, it's the entire body of the woman except the face, but there's some valid differences of opinions there. So we'll take only the face. So the hands are not to be shown. So some said the face and the hands, some said even the foot, but the face is what can be shown, only the face. And the hands, if it's under the khimar, then it's covered. So she doesn't have to wear gloves, but it's to be under the khimar. And for those who say that the hands are permissible to show, it's the palm. So these types of sleeves like this, that shows the awra of the woman, right? And say Allahu Akbar, and then things like that. So yeah, they have to be extremely careful. And that's why, again, we're not getting into the differences of opinion. So the face. And she doesn't have to wear socks also. If she's wearing something covering while she's standing, her foot is covered. But if she goes to sujood, the bottom of the foot can show, no problem. As long as when she's standing, her foot is not shown. So satrul awra, wajtinabul najasa, to stay away from the impurities, is a condition for the salah. And these conditions has masail with the same with every condition. Like for example, ijtinab and najasa. If a person in the salah and he realized that there's najasa on his jacket, for example, he remembered there's najasa on his jacket, or he carries a bottle that has urine, for example, because he was going to make some test, for example, and he forgot it in his pocket or something like this during the salah. If he's able to remove it or to take the jacket off and put it on the side with slight movement like this, the salah is valid and he continues. He doesn't have to break the salah. But if the najasa continues to be with the person, then he has to leave the salah. Like on his pants, for example, and he's sure that there's najasa on his pants, so then he has to walk out of the salah to clean himself. He doesn't have to repeat the wudu. The wudu is valid, just to remove the najasa. And the Prophet ﷺ, during the salah, he took his shoes off, ﷺ. So the Sahaba did the same thing during the salah. And then the Prophet ﷺ, after the salah, they didn't ask. They just did what the Prophet ﷺ did. And after the salah, nobody said to the Prophet ﷺ what happened. They just, after the salah, everything is normal. So the Prophet ﷺ asked them, why did you take your shoes off? They said, we saw you, O Prophet of Allah, taking the shoes off. So we took the shoes off for complete following the Prophet ﷺ. He said, Jibreel ﷺ came to me and informed me that there's najasa in it. And clearly, as the ulama, they say, the Prophet ﷺ did not start the salah over. He just removed them and continued the salah. So that means he started the salah with some najasa on and did not know about it till he got to know, then he took the najasa away and the salah is valid. And that's why if you discover after the salah that there was najasa on you, impurity, your salah is valid. You don't have to repeat the salah because you didn't know. This is with regards to ijtinab and najasa. So what are the conditions? An-niyya, al-islam, al-aql, sanity, at-tamiz. Is it called sanity when someone is saying? Sanity is cleanliness, right? Sanity is right? Okay, I'm good. Okay. So an-niyya, al-islam, al-aql, at-tamiz, the age of, not the age of puberty. Tamiz is the age of knowing things. Know that salah is important. This breaks the salah. That doesn't, like 7 years old or so. Some children might be before that. So it can be different, slightly different from one child to the other. Dukhul waqt, the beginning of the time, the entrance of the time of the salah. At-tahara, purification. Number 6. Facing the qibla. Number 7. Covering the awrah. Number 8. And number 9, ijtinab and najasa, to stay away from the najasa. So there's many things to memorize, inshallah ta'ala. So this is the shurut of the salah briefly. Masail, and we mentioned some of them, will come later, inshallah ta'ala. The next one, awqatu as-salawat al-khams. The timing for the salawat, the 5 daily salah. And awqat comes from at-tawqit, and at-tawqit from waqt or time, which is at-tahdid, to very specifically mention something. So this is basically the waqt or the time that makes the salah obligatory. So Salatul Isha now, is it obligatory upon us? It's not time for the adhan yet, right? So it's not obligatory upon us yet, right? So once the time starts, then Salatul Isha is obligatory upon us. And a person doesn't have to do it right after it starts. You can delay the salah, especially with Salatul Jama'ah and things like this. And the best, of course, of the timing is at the beginning of the salah, except Salatul Isha, it's best to delay it unless a person is praying with the Jama'ah. So this is awqat as-salah, which is the waqt, the time for the salah that makes it obligatory. And it's a condition, as we heard, for the validity of the salah, that the time of the salah starts. And this is all by the wahy from Allah, revelation from Allah. It's not up to anyone to decide when the time of the salah starts. And that's why he mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ, he's the one ﷺ, by the revelation from Allah, he's the one that mentioned the beginning of every salah in very specific. It doesn't matter whether you have a sophisticated means or whether you are in the desert or in the jungle. Every single person on the face of earth can make salah perfectly, with ease and means, because this is the most obligatory action in one's life. And he mentioned a portion of the hadith of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, that the Prophet ﷺ said, أَمَّنِ جِبْرِيلُ عِنْدَ الْبَيْتِ مَرَّتَيْنِ. after the night of Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj, when the Prophet ﷺ ascended to the heavens and he came down, which is the salah was given to the Prophet ﷺ as an obligation, 5 daily salah. The next day, Jibreel alayhi salam came down to the Prophet ﷺ and he led him in the salah, Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and Isha, in the beginning of every time, to show him the beginning of every time, and he led him in the salah. And then the next day he came and he led the Prophet ﷺ at the end of every salah, the end of Salatul Fajr, the end of Salatul Dhuhr, like this. So he got to know the beginning and the end of every salah. And then he mentioned the rest of the hadith. ثم التفت إلي جبريل. When Jibreel alayhi salam, he led the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam in the salah, he looked at me and he said, يا محمد هذا وقت الأنبياء من قبلك والوقت فيما بين هذين. This is the waqt, this is the time of the prophets before you, and the time is between these two times, the beginning and the end of the salah. And this is in Sunan Abi Dawud. And as he, even though in matters of fiqh, these things not necessarily is always mentioned, but he mentioned something about that how the timings of the salah and some of the wisdom behind it, that it's distributed throughout the day and the night, so that nobody worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala according to their desires. Some people, they like to do things in the morning only. Some people, they like to do things in the afternoon or in night time. So you're a abd to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So 5 daily salah throughout the day and the night, for people to submit themselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says, if someone take enough sleep during the night and it's close to the morning time, which is the time of energy and effort and seeking provisions from Allah, then you would find the time for Salatul Fajr, so that the person, as he mentioned here, good benefit, كي يشعر الإنسان بتميزه عن بقية المخلوقات, so that the human being would see that he's special, different than the rest of the creation of Allah. You don't start your day with going seeking provisions. This is not the objective of your life. The goal of your life is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So the first thing that a person do before even the day starts, Fajr time. Person would say, why Fajr is like at this time? Why can't it be at 8 o'clock in the morning? It's easier for people. No, it's the break of dawn. So that the first thing in the day, a person is busy with the ibadah of Allah as a reminder that this is the objective, this is the goal of one's life. And then after the salah and the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and so on, if a person then he seeks provisions from Allah to come back again for the salah to separate the goals from the means. And when it's the middle of the day, he leaves everything to reflect and to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the time for Salatul Dhuhr. And you see how you're taken away from all of the busyness of the day and things like this, to empty your heart from anything of this world, to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone and to be devoted for Salatul Dhuhr. And you can go on and on with this. Al-Qayyim rahimahullah in his book of As-Salah, and how the wisdom behind things. Salatul Sunnah, for example, for Salatul Dhuhr, 4 rak'ah before the fard, and 2 or even some virtue of praying 4 after Dhuhr, because you're busy. Your heart is busy, so you need to prepare yourself for the fard salah. You come for, and the virtues of coming early for Salatul Dhuhr, so that you would devote your heart in the salah. And you find the sunnah 4 rak'ah. And that, so that the fard salah comes, and this is by the mercy of Allah, you devote yourself for Salatul Dhuhr, so that you don't waste the salah in the heart being busy. And the rewards of every salah is according to how much khushu' and devotion and focus and concentration that a person has in the salah. As the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that inna ahadakum yansarifu ma kutiba lahu min as-salah illa ushruha tus'uha thumunuha sub'uha sudusuha khumusuha rubu'uha thuluthuha nisfuha. That when you leave the salah, it's written for you either 1/10 of the salah, 1/9, 1/8, 1/7, 1/6, 1/5, 1/4, 1/3, 1/2. Meaning the amount of the rewards that is given according ما عقلت منها, what you're focused in the salah and the khushu' in it. So that's why you would find many things, the salah silent, dhuhr and asr, versus when it's recited out loud, because you're busy throughout the day, so it's more to focus with the Quran and listening to the Quran, maghrib and isha and fajr, and many things of that nature. And then that's the maghrib, he says, talks about the maghrib, and then the darkness and then the light and the real guidance is to the straight path. So for people to reflect also upon the creation of Allah, the day and the night ayat, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran. And we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with these ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He created it this way so that we observe the salah. And there's rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during the day that you cannot fulfill it during the night. And there's rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you would fulfill it during the night, that you're not able to fulfill it during the day, and so on. Then he mentions waqt salat al-dhuhr. What is the waqt? What is the time for salat al-dhuhr? أول وقت الظهر يبدأ عند الزوال. Time for dhuhr is the zawal. What is zawal? Zawal comes from zala al-shay, when something is removed, when something moves from its place, which is basically the mail al-shams. Al-shams. And this is always is best to be done in a practical way. But before we get to the definition of it, we have the a stick or the thing that a person would use for the salah. And it's always something that is put, and it's according to how the sun and the shade of the sun. So the time of dhuhr starts with the zawal, which is mailu shamsi an kabadi sama. The movement of the sun from the middle of the skies. So this is the beginning of the time of the dhuhr. And how would you know that? Is when you have a stick in the ground, and if the sun is rising from the east, where's the shade? The shade is on the other side, on the west side. And when the more the sun rises, the more the shade decreases, till it reaches a state where, right when it's in the middle, what happens to the shade? Does it disappear? No, there's still some shade because it's the shade of the stick, right? So once the shade goes to the other side, that's the time for dhuhr. Once the slightest shade of the stick goes to the east side, that's the zawal. That's the time for dhuhr. That means the sun had moved right in the second half of the hemisphere or the skies or whatever. So this is the first time of dhuhr. وآخر وقتها, and the last time of dhuhr, when إذا صار ظل كل شيء مثله سوى فيء الزوال. Once the shade of everything is exactly the same as that thing, any physical object, which is, for example, the stick that is put on the ground. Once the shade is the same length as the stick, minus the shade of the zawal that you already recorded. So once the sun, when it went to the east, there was a shade. When the sun went to the west, there was a shade on the east, right? Say, for example, that shade was 5 centimeters. And the stick is, say, 20 centimeters. I'm talking about centimeters here. So it's okay with you guys? So when is the time of the dhuhr ends? When it becomes, if this is, say, 20 inches, okay, and it's 5 inches is the shade of the zawal. So the 20 inches, this is the stick. When is the end? What is the end time of dhuhr? When the length of the shade is 25. Because it's 20, right? But then you have the 5 extra in the beginning. So so when you say صار ظل الشيء مثل, it's the same shade of the stick, but many times people they forget about that small shade or that small portion that was there from the beginning. So you add that to it. So this is the end of Salatul Dhuhr. Alhamdulillah that, the mu'adhineen nowadays, they don't have to do these types of things, which is very nice and it's easy anyway. So this is the beginning and the end of Salatul Dhuhr. وقت صلاة العصر, the beginning of Salatul Asr, is إذا صار ظل كل شيء مثله, which is the end of Salatul Dhuhr. So the beginning of Salatul Asr is the end of Salatul Dhuhr. There is difference of opinions, yes, but we're not going to get into this, inshallah ta'ala. أما آخر وقت العصر, and as far as the last time for Asr, which is Asr and Isha, they have 2 times basically. There is al-waqt al-mukhtar and the waqt that is the darura. And mukhtar is the choice. If you have a choice, you have to pray asr before that end part of it, which is إذا صار ظل الشيء مثليه. When the shade of the stick or the shade of whatever becomes double the size of that stick or that thing, with, of course, the small shade of the zawal. So it's double. Dhuhr was one, the same. Asr is double. This is the end time of Asr when you have a choice. When you don't have a choice, person is in emergency, whatever there is, he's not able to make salah, then it's extended till Maghrib. But the time of Asr is not till Maghrib. Person has to pray Asr before it reaches that state, unless he is in necessity. Okay, so we got the beginning of Dhuhr and the end of Dhuhr, and the beginning of Asr is the end of Dhuhr, and then the end of Asr is when the shade is double. This is waqtul ikhtiyar. Al-ikhtiyar is the time of choice, if you have a choice. Waqtu salat al-maghrib is عند غروب الشمس, when the sun completely sets. From your perspective, from your position, whether you are in a high tower building, then it's your ghurub at your position up there versus someone on the ground, then it's his on the ground. So there's a difference, of course. So you have to be to the best of your ability where you are. If you're in the plane, the ghurub is to you, not what's on the ground. So when the entire disk of the sun disappears, all of it, not that it starts to disappear. And many of the calculations they calculated based on the beginning of the disappearing of the sun. So it has to disappear completely. This is the beginning of Salatul Maghrib. وآخر وقت المغرب اشتباك النجوم. He says the last time for Maghrib is when the stars are clear, which is وآخر وقت الجواز مع الكراهة مغيب الشفق, which is basically the disappearing of الشفق. الشفق is what's in the horizon, the redness in the horizon. Once that disappears, this is the end of Salatul Fajr. But he mentions here, once the disappearing of the redness in the horizon, there's a slight or few minutes maybe afterwards where it's still the time for Maghrib. And that's what Ishtibak al-Nujum, when the stars becomes clear. But, so it's to be on the safe side, of course, it's when the red horizon and the horizon disappears. And many people, they don't see what's in the horizon anyway. So, but for those who are able to see that, this is the end of Salatul Maghrib. Is it clear? Waqtu Salatul Isha is Maghrib al-Shafaq, the disappearance of the redness in the horizon. This is the beginning of Salatul Isha. آخر وقت العشاء, the last part of وقت العشاء, is the middle of the night. Is the middle of the night, not Fajr. Is the middle of the night. Unless a person was not able to make Salah, then there's no harm. But if a person has a choice, then it's the middle of the night. And that's why if you're traveling, coming back, driving, or whatever, right, your Salatul Isha ends in the middle of the night. So you have to make your decisions based on this. In the middle of the night, whether you calculate that from Maghrib to Fajr or from Isha to Fajr, it doesn't matter. It's close. So you can say from Maghrib to Fajr, how many hours? Divided by 2, this is the middle of the night. So it's not 12 o'clock midnight. It's what's between Maghrib and Fajr. You divide that by 2. So when is the middle of the night nowadays? 6 till 6 probably, right? So 6 to 12 hours exactly. So that means 6 hours after 6, which is 12. So nowadays it's 12. So this is the middle of the night. وقت صلاة الفجر. The beginning of صلاة الفجر أول وقت هو طلوع الفجر الثاني. He did not go into the details here. He says the beginning of Fajr is the second Fajr, because there's the Al-Fajr al-Kadhib, or the lying one, the deceiving one. There's light that shoots up in the skies before the real Fajr. And it shoots like this. Then different than the true Fajr that spreads by the horizon. So, and we're not going into the details of what degrees and all of this. So this is the beginning of Salatul Fajr. وآخره, and the last part of Fajr is طلوع الشمس, is when the sun rises, not when the entire sun rises, once the tip of the sun shows, that means that's the end of Salatul Fajr. Okay? So this is briefly the times for the salawat. He mentioned something here for our present times, which is not usually mentioned in the books of fiqh, but we'll mention it anyway, inshallah. He says the time of the salah in the countries where the north or south, and he classifies the countries or so in the world, the one that is between خطي العرض 45 and 48. What's خطوط العرض? The 45 degree, between 45 and 48 degree, north and south, which is basically, he called al-alamat al-kawniyya, the normal places where there's sunrise and sunset. Then if there's a sunrise and sunset, then the 5 daily salah is to be known according to these rulings. Doesn't matter whether it's the day is long or the night is short, as long as there's sunrise and sunset every day, then people have to follow the timings of the salah. If they complain that in Ramadan the night is so short and the day is so long, there's a sunrise and sunset, if the answer is yes, that means they have to follow that. And maybe in Ramadan they can go to Mecca or Medina and they make Umrah and they don't have to go through this. But anyway, they have to follow if the sunrise and sunset is there in their places. But between 48 and 66, which is some days of the year, the shafaq or the horizon or the light in the horizon does not disappear. And the third case, where it's for a long period of time of the year, it's all nights or all days. So what is the ruling when it comes to this? Is the barakah of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith of ad-Dajjal. Because this is something that the Prophet ﷺ gave us the answer to this. When the Prophet ﷺ in their place, there's no such a thing. But the hadith of ad-Dajjal, when the Dajjal comes, and the Prophet ﷺ, when he was asked how long he would stay on the face of earth, he says, Yawmun kasana. The first day the Dajjal comes, the first day is like 1 year. The second day is like a month. The third day is like a week. The fourth day is like the rest of the days of your year, of your days. So he's going to stay for a year. The first day is like a year. The second day is like a month. The third day is like a week. And then the rest of the days are like your normal days. And subhanallah, this hadith and the like of it is an evidence against those who always they have to twist things. If this hadith is recited to many people today, they would say the Prophet ﷺ is talking metaphorically. The first day is like a year, that means it's a long day. So when is this day is going to end? It feels like a year, right? So the Sahaba radiallahu, this is not the case, because the Sahaba radiallahu see how, they asked the Prophet ﷺ, هذا اليوم الذي كسنا أتكفينا فيه صلاة يوم وليلة. They asked the Prophet ﷺ, this day that is like a year, is it sufficient for us the salah of a day and night, 5 daily salah in this first day which is like a year? He says, لا. Prophet ﷺ, he said, no, it is not sufficient for you in that day when the Dajjal comes that you pray 5 prayers only. He said, اقدروا له قدره. Count, calculate for it your salah. That means in that first day you will pray the 1 year prayer. Even though the entire day, it's just 1 day. That means it's a continuous day, but you have to calculate the salah. So every 24 hours, basically, or whatever you will be able to calculate, whatever means, that's the salah is going to be repeated, 5, 5, 5. So as if you're praying the prayer of an entire year. So first of all, it shows how when it comes to matters of unseen, to leave the matter the way it is. But the benefit here that we learned from the hadith is that the ulama, they used it for the countries that there's no sunset or sunrise. So they have to calculate their 5 daily salah. Whether it's to the closest country to them that has sunrise and sunset, and many said this is what is more appropriate. So the closest country to them that has sunrise and sunset, this is how they calculate their salah timings. And then they forget about the sun and the darkness, and because there's no sunset and sunrise. So they go by the timings of the closest country to them. Or some said something, a good reference for them, like Mecca and Medina, but it doesn't matter. But it's what's more likely is the closest country to them, the closest place to them that has sunrise and sunset. This is where they need to follow. Okay, so and we see that from the hadith of Ad-Dajjal, and we should remember that, inshallah. So, what is the ruling for those who the sun does not set for months? How should they make their timings of the salah? They have to calculate the 5 daily salah every 24 hours, and according to the hadith of Ad-Dajjal, as the Prophet ﷺ mentioned. Clear, inshallah. The next subject is Salatul Jama'ah, but because of the time, we'll stop here, inshallah. And we'll take just the hadith of the day quickly, inshallah. And then if you have any questions related, inshallah, it has to be related to the subject. Today's hadith, inshallah, and mashallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward those who recited the hadith. Mashallah, very nice today and still tomorrow also, inshallah. Okay. Very easy hadith, inshallah, for today. Hadith number 65. Hadith number 65. Very easy, inshallah. Everybody have it memorized, inshallah. We're ready. Repeat after me, inshallah. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه. عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: لولا أن أشق على أمتي لولا أن أشق على أمتي لأمرتهم بالسواك مع كل وضوء. لولا أن أشق على أمتي لأمرتهم بالسواك مع كل وضوء. لولا أن أشق على أمتي لأمرتهم بالسواك مع كل وضوء. رجه مالك وأحمد والنسائي وصاحب ابن خزيمة. And the hadith, as you know it, لولا أن أشق على أمتي. لولا is حرف امتناع. It means is there an equivalent to لولا in English? Okay, they translate it always like, if it wasn't for أن أشق على أمتي, that I would make it difficult for my المشقة is the difficulty that comes with it, fatigue and tiredness. So لولا أن أشق على أمتي, upon my ummah, if it wasn't that I would fear that I would bring hardship and difficulty for my ummah, for my people, I would have commanded them, لأمرتهم, I would have commanded them to السواك, to use السواك. بالسواك لأمرتهم بالسواك, which means I would command them with the siwak. That means what? To use the siwak with every عند, أو here مع كل وضوء, مع كل وضوء, with every wudu, with every wudu. So that means it's like the Prophet ﷺ is saying that he wanted to make it as an obligation. He wished that he would say it as an obligation, but he doesn't want to make it difficult for his ummah. So that means using the siwak, is it fard or a condition of the salah, or it's a sunnah for wudu, or a sunnah for wudu, recommended act for wudu? It's a recommended act for wudu because of this first statement. لولا أن أشق على أمتي. If the Prophet ﷺ, he said, عليكم بالسواك مع كل wudu, use the siwak with every wudu, that means that it's what? It's an obligation. But he says, لولا أن أشق على أمتي. And this shows, how the ease and the matter of ease in the deen, but at the same time, it shows how important is the siwak. So it doesn't mean that you leave the siwak. No, you should make sure that you treat the siwak as if it's an obligation. Because the only thing that did not make this as an obligation is the fact that it would have been very difficult and people would fall into so much sins as a result of this. So to relieve the ummah from the sins, is that it's not an obligation, but it's just to relieve them from the sins. Not that it's not important. No, it's very important, and it's as important as the obligation. And in this hadith, مع كل وضوء, and you can have another hadith to memorize it for free, but it doesn't count here, is the same hadith, but at the end, مع كل صلاة, with every salah. In some narrations, عند, which is right before, not an hour before the wudu. It's right before the wudu and right before the salah. So لولا أن أشق على أمتي. لولا أن أشق على أمتي, if it wasn't that I would make it أشق, again مشقة upon my ummah, لأمرتهم, I would have commanded them بالسواك مع كل wudu. And there's like of these hadith with the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, لولا حديث عهد قومك بالشرك, when he said to Aisha radiallahu anha, if it's because the people are still new in Islam, he would have rebuilt the Kaaba on the Qawa'id of Ibrahim. But he didn't want to cause fitna to the people, that they would see the Kaaba is being destroyed and rebuilt again. And even though it's now it's in the same way it was at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, but when they rebuilt it again, it was built on the expansion, and then when it was rebuilt again, they brought it back to the way it was at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, so that nobody, as some of the imam they said, so that no one, a ruler would come and he would make it bigger, smaller, all of these things. So this is something to be considered, of course. لولا أن أشق على أمتي لأمرتهم بالسواك مع كل وضوء. Is there a like of this in the Quran? ولولا أن يكون الناس أمة واحدة لجعلنا لمن يكفر بالرحمن لبيوتهم سقفا من فضة. If it wasn't that everybody will disbelieve, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have made this world in such a way that for those who disbelieve, they will have لبيوتهم سقفا من فضة, they will have ceilings of silver for their homes, elevators and gates of. So why this is not the case? Because this would have been a huge fitna for human beings. Everybody will be disbelievers. Because imagine if everybody disbelieve, and every time someone becomes a disbeliever, he becomes very rich immediately. So most of the people, a'udhu billah, might then fall into disbelief. But that's not the case. That's by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We say it one more time. لولا أن أشق على أمتي لأمرتهم بالسواك مع كل وضوء. لأمرتهم بالسواك مع كل وضوء. مع كل وضوء.
الله أكبر الله أكبر.